Welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. Today we're going to be talking about the Royce Report. Now, a lot of people don't like the Royce Report because they say it's negative, but I want to say that I think the Royce Report, the report that's put out by Julie Royce, investigative reporter, is important. It's very necessary, I think, in today's age with the rampant spread of parachurch ministries and megachurch pastors and unaccountable leaders in the Christian church. We need watchdogs. We need discernment ministries. We need people who will simply not accept the basically media statements put out by ministries and churches and leaders, but need to dig underneath all of the publicity reports and public relations releases. And we need to know what the truth is, and we need to hold people accountable. And that's what I believe Julie Royce does. So I'm going to take a little time today to undercover what exactly the Royce Report is and what it has done. Let's start. As you can see, there is a website called the Royce Report. I have it up here. And let's explore a little bit about what this actually is. It says here that the Royce Report is a Christian media outlet reporting the unvarnished truth about what's happening in the Christian community so the church can be reformed and restored. So that's a good purpose. We need people to do that. We need investigative journalists to snoop around and find out what's really taking place rather than just rely on the press releases of these churches and these organizations and these leaders and these denominations and so forth. We need some accountability, and sadly, we don't have a lot of accountability in the evangelical Christian world. Now, on the other side of the line, there is the Roman Catholic world, and it too needs investigative journalists. And so that's why I'm sad to see that the organization Church Militant is now teetering on the brink of extinction because its founder and its main personality, Michael Voris, has been dismissed by the board of directors there at Church Militant, this Catholic watchdog group. And for various reasons, the one main reason being that he violated the so-called morality clause of their board of directors' articles of incorporation and so forth. So he was let go. And so, in other words, you have the watchdog being watched and found wanting. So that's the way it is. That's the way it is in the sinful world. We need people watching each other. We need people holding each other accountable. Nobody is outside of accountability. So in the Catholic world, this group, the Church Militant, was greatly used, I believe, by God to expose some of the hypocritical leaders, the bishops, even the Pope. They were critical of the Pope. And this Pope, Francis, definitely needs to have a lot of criticism because he is really muddying the water for all Christians. He's really confusing the world. The world listens to him and says, wait a minute, now the church is saying this is okay, when before it said it was bad. And Pope Francis is a liberalizing effect in the church. He's distorting the truth. And as a Protestant, I can say that I don't look to Pope Francis as some kind of an authority like the Roman Catholic Church does. But I can also say that even though he's not my authority, he does have influence. And when he speaks, people listen, and the newspapers print what he says. And so when he misspeaks for Christianity, that's also a distortion. And it does affect all of us. It affects Roman Catholics mostly, but it affects also Protestants and also Eastern Orthodox because, again, the Pope for better or for worse, I think it's for worse, but he speaks for Christianity in the eyes of the world. And when he comes up with these gaffes and false teachings and heresy and apostasy and does all this, he is really causing confusion in the entire world. So there needs to be a watchdog group, many watchdog groups in the Catholic Church, and you do have them. Among them, Church Militant, again, like I said, right now is trying to reorganize and regather itself and continue its mission of exposing the corruption and lies and the hypocrisies in the Roman Catholic Church. But there's also LifeSite News. I believe the man that leads that is John Henry Weston. And then you have also groups like The Remnant Video with Michael Matt. They put out a publication, The Remnant newspaper, and that is highly critical of the corruption in the Catholic Church, especially the pontificate of Pope Francis. But even before that, a lot of the bishops and cardinals, and there was this huge sexual abuse scandal which erupted in the new millennium, the 2000s. And so you have an ongoing crisis in the Roman Catholic Church of unaccountability and corruption. Well, also in the Evangelical Church, although not to that degree, you have corruption, you have hypocrisy, you have leaders who think they can do things that other ordinary Christians can't do and get away with it. And Julie Royce is a voice of discernment, and she fulfills a very important function. So we really should encourage her, even though at times she perhaps goes to excess and is too, I would say, too critical of certain ministries that actually are not corrupt and are not actually doing anything wrong. But that's the price you pay for holding each other accountable. Sometimes you'll get it wrong. Hopefully most of the time you get it right. But it does serve an important function overall. So let me just continue to read from her website as to the purpose of her organization. Founded by investigative journalist Julie Royce, the Royce Report began as a personal blog where Julie published her commentaries and occasional investigative pieces while working as a national radio host on Moody Radio. However, in 2018, Julie published a series of articles on her website exposing corrupt and mission drift at the Moody Bible Institute. This led to the exit of 3 top officers at Moody. It also ended Julie's relationship with Moody and changed the focus of Julie's website from a blog offering cultural commentary to an independent Christian media outlet exposing corruption, abuse, and what's been termed the evangelical industrial complex. Okay, so she was, for many years, I would say, a commentator and also a personality on Moody Radio. And she began to poke around at Moody and began to find some hypocrisy and corruption there. And basically that cost her job. But it did expose some things that needed addressed there at Moody Bible Institute. So she was willing to even disrupt her own career in order to, I guess, expose the truth. And that's good. That's a good thing. Even though it's a messy thing and it's an ugly thing, we need to have people who are willing to dig around and even get to the bottom of the truth, even if it means exposing and scandalizing people. Better to have a scandal that exposes the truth than to simply have that sore fester and become deadly. So in 2018 to 2019, Julie wrote dozens of stories revealing bullying, deceit, and financial abuse by celebrity preacher James McDonald in Harvest Bible Chapel. In the course of her reporting, Harvest fired McDonald, and the entire board of elders at the church resigned. So again, she was poking around and exposed some corruption, some hypocrisy, financial mismanagement. And again, all of these things are important for this reason. If the churches and if these ministries don't operate above board and they don't operate out of truth, and they're cutting corners and they're acting hypocritically, and they're saying one thing but doing another thing, and there's corruption, and there's financial mismanagement, and there's moral failures, and so on and so forth, but they want to cover it up, and they want to just cover over all of these problems and pretend like they're not even there, and the people just go waltzing along into the future without any accountability. No, that can't stand, because eventually that corruption will take down a church, will take down a ministry, take down a denomination, and it will hurt all of evangelicalism. So, yeah, you have to deal with problems. You can't sweep problems under the rug. And so, in the age of the internet and broadcasts and mass communication, there has been a lot of corruption that has been swept under the rug by these ministries because, again, they don't expose themselves and they don't hold themselves accountable. So who's going to do that? And most people don't have the time, the inclination, the motivation, or the finances to even poke around and spend their time trying to find out what the truth is. But Julie Royce and others like her who are investigative journalists, we need to encourage them to go ahead and continue on their work because the church needs it. We need accountability. We need to expose the frauds. We need to expose the hypocrites. We need to expose the immoral and the financially corrupt. So we need to expose all of these things. Again, it's better to get it out into the light. Again, what does the Bible say? If we walk in the light as he is in the light. So John, the writer of the gospel, and also 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, likes to talk, also in Book of Revelation, likes to talk a lot about light. That was the main theme of John. And we need to live by that light, the light of Christ. We need to have our relationships and our finances and our ministries very transparent and not be hiding anything. Hypocrisy is like one of the worst things that can happen in a church because you're hiding things, you're covering things up. You're not dealing in truth as much as public relations and perception. These are all things that are found in the secular world, but they should not be in the church. We see, for example, in the book of Acts, Ananias and Sapphira, they were involved in financial corruption and hypocrisy. They promised the sale of the land that they owned. They promised the entire amount to the church. And then when it came to give that amount, they actually give back a little bit less than the full amount. They kept back some for themselves. And what was wrong with that? It was not that they kept back less than the full amount to give to the church. It was that they said that they would give the full amount to the church, and they didn't. So they lied. It was hypocritical of them to claim that they were giving it all when they weren't giving it all. And so the Holy Spirit exposed it all and revealed it to the leaders of the church, and then Ananias and Sapphira paid for their sin with their life because it looks like the Lord had struck them down. So it's very important for God to have a clean church, a truthful church. And so anyone who is dealing in the truth and exposing the lies really should have our encouragement. So Julie Royce began to dig around and found that there were problems at Harvest Bible Chapel and James McDonald, and then it went on to expose this. Then other issues Julie has exposed include sexual misconduct of Ravi Zacharias. And so, again, that was very important that this man, Ravi Zacharias, be exposed as a hypocrite and a corrupt Christian leader because he was so widely respected in the Christian church. By the grace of God, I never was really influenced very much by his ministry, Ravi Zacharias. I have one of his books. I've never read the book, but it's on my shelf. I've never really listened to many of his lectures or his recordings, his debates. He was a very, very famous and influential Christian who would travel around the world and debate skeptics and atheists and agnostics and unbelievers and would defend the Christian faith. And he was very successful at that. He had built a $1 million ministry, multi-million-dollar ministry, RZMI, I guess it was Ravi Zacharias Ministries International, had many people working for him, have influenced many apologists and defenders of the faith, and really was a key leader in the evangelical Christian movement, Bible-believing Christian movement, Protestant movement in the United States and also in Europe and also other parts of the world. Yet, underneath it all, he was acting immorally and conducting himself in a non-Christian way, and it had to come out. Well, unfortunately, it was only after his death that all of this came out, but Julie Royce was helpful in exposing Ravi as a hypocrite and a corrupt leader. And there needed to be accountability, and there wasn't. So what usually happens is these organizations, whether it's a ministry like Ravi Zacharias International or a church, they are very, very reluctant and hesitant to be transparent in respect to scandals or financial or moral failures of the leaders, so they try to cover it up, and then things go downhill from there. Well, Julie Royce was also helpful in discovering, for example, here, sexual abuse and mismanagement at Willow Creek Church. Again, where other people were trying to run cover for Bill Hybels, who was the senior pastor at the time, or the Willow Creek organization was and is, I believe, still today, run very much like a business. So they were in public relations mode. They were in crisis management mode. And, they hire consultants to help with their image and all of these things. So you have to fight through all of these efforts by a lot of these organizations and churches to actually get to the truth. What happened and who was doing it and why were they doing it and so on and so forth. And Julie Royce, again, has done a great service in exposing some of the hypocrisies, inconsistencies in Christianity. John MacArthur, this might be, it says, Protection of Pedophiles and Punishment of Abuse Victims by John MacArthur. This is a situation where there were some people who either had worked in the ministry or had worked at the church in some capacity, and they were accused of abuse by some people or victims. Now, this is an example of possibly Julie Royce going too far, because there's always this situation where, okay, this person says this and this person says this, and sort of a he said, she said kind of a thing. Who do you believe if there isn't overwhelming evidence in one direction or the other? So who do you believe? Well, this might be a case where Julie Royce is looking for something and not finding as much as we need to get a conclusive verdict on this. And yet, if you're going to investigate something, you might as well dig and dig and dig and dig and dig until you find something at least. So she might have been overzealous in the case of John MacArthur. She might have been over accusing and not trying to read the situation from the perspective of the elders who had to deal with this problem. So she might have been too hard on John MacArthur and Grace Community Church, but that's still up in the air. But again, the question is, she may be too overzealous in some cases, but is that any worse than being underzealous in other cases? For example, if you go overboard in looking for problems, is that worse than going underboard? And for example, if you are a little oversensitive about things in some circumstances, is that better than being undersensitive? They're both problems. Of course, a lot of the organizations and denominations and leaders and ministries and churches, they underemphasize church problems. And then people like Julie Royce and other investigative discernment ministries, they overemphasize things because there might be something there. Well, sometimes they'll get it wrong, and they keep pushing and pushing to try to prove that there's something there when there isn't anything there. That might be the case in the case of John MacArthur, although it may not be. I don't know. But I don't think you can fault Julie Royce if she questions and doesn't give the benefit of the doubt to, say, someone like a John MacArthur, because she's looking for the truth. She's searching for the truth, and it's better to dig and find in the end that there was nothing there than there is to just ignore the problem and don't report anything. So let people decide for themselves, and that's the best thing to do. And I think Julie Royce does a pretty good job of that. Even, like I said, even if she is a little overzealous in some areas, even beyond what is warranted, it's almost better to be that way than to be a little too easy on people. Yeah, make people prove their innocence. Ask them questions. Raise questions. I think it was good for her to raise questions about John MacArthur and even John MacArthur's lifestyle and his income. If he's a millionaire, okay, he's got to own that. If he's worth millions and millions of dollars and he has homes in different parts of the country and his income is $1 million a year or so, I mean, if he's going to live that way, he needs to be able to justify that. And just because Julie Royce is questioning him doesn't mean she's wrong. And just because it's somebody like John MacArthur who doesn't like to be questioned, or his staff or his church doesn't like to be under the magnifying glass with investigative reporting, that's too bad. If you're a high-profile ministry and you're doing things, you need to be able to justify what you're doing. And if you can't justify what you're doing, maybe you shouldn't be doing them. So yeah, I applaud her. Julie Royce is a veteran investigative reporter and founder of the Royce Report. Before that, she hosted Moody radio network called It's Up for Debate. She also worked as a TV reporter for a CBS affiliate and as a news writer for both WGN-TV and Fox News Chicago. Julie is an author and has written in numerous periodicals, including World Magazine. That's another sort of investigative magazine, World Magazine. They've uncovered quite a bit of corruption too, and have questioned even the big and powerful ministries that are out there in the world. So that's good. Christianity Today, Religion News Service, and The Federalist. Julie holds a bachelor's degree in history from Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and a master's degree in broadcast journalism from the prestigious Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University. Julie and her husband Neil live in the Chicago suburbs and have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Julie is also a member of the Royce Report Board of Directors. Okay, so they have a board. And then it talks about some of the, believe, board members. Are these the board members? Yeah. So she has a board, and these are people who hold her accountable. And I'm sure that they would be willing to expose her if she were involved in corruption and financial mismanagement and so forth. So it's a good thing. We need more accountability in the Christian church, the Protestant church. Now, if you go to their website right now, they're dealing with this Mike Bickle, the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. And again, this is kind of ugly stuff. It's not kind of the most encouraging information that Christians run into. It's not the best news. This man, Mike Bickle, has been leading this 24/7 prayer meeting. Not literally, he hasn't been there 24/7, but he's organizing a continuous round-the-clock prayer meeting for the world and for our nation and for churches and so on and so forth. A really good thing. I mean, you can't knock a 24/7 prayer meeting that seeks to encourage Christians to pray more. But he has admitted now, thanks to the pressure and accountability that Julie Royce and others have held him to, that he had involved in inappropriate relationship 20 years ago with a 19-year-old young woman. So, yeah, that's corruption. That's moral failure. And we need to hold these leaders accountable. Why? Because if they know that they're going to be held accountable, then they won't be inclined to be sloppy and careless and immoral and do things that are questionable and inappropriate. If they know that someone is going to hold them accountable, then they won't live these loose and reckless lives. And there is no place in Christian leadership for a recklessly immoral person, for a financially corrupt person, for a prideful person, for someone who is willing to cover up their sins. There's no place in Christian ministry at all, in Christian leadership at all, in the church or in the parachurch ministries. There's no place for that. So if these people are not going to be held accountable by their local churches, by their local board of directors, by their local congregations, if they're not going to be held accountable by the people who are supposed to hold them accountable, then they must be held accountable by people outside, like Julie Royce and her organization, the Royce Report. So, we need to pray for these kind of discernment ministries. We need to pray for organizations like Julie Royce Report and similar ones, that they will, in fact, hold these leaders' feet to the fire. They will hold them accountable. They will produce reform and renewal by virtue of their poking around and investigating, and put the fear of God in our leaders so that they will, if they're not even, their character doesn't compel them to be moral, then the fear of God and being exposed and humiliated and ashamed will make them accountable. So it's a good thing. We need to pray for more of this. Well, God bless you. We'll see you back next week on another program.